Okay, so here we are at, this is sort of the second level of what we're going to be doing here. So here's our scene, which is just one bullet and a couple of background panels that we're going to be using to create our scene. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm just going to set this up a little bit better, is we're going to talk about trying to make this look a little bit better. So, and the first thing that we need to do is we probably need more of these bullets, and we're probably going to have to position it so that they're on the ground. So at the moment this one is kind of up here, and that's no good. So we're going to put it down to the ground. Oh, that's through the ground, so that's no good either. So there we go. That's close enough. And then I'm going to duplicate it by pressing Shift D. And now I've created a duplicate object. And then I'm going to rotate that. And I'm going to rotate that by 90. I mean, you could do it manually, but if you do it a little bit wrong, it'll look not great. And so there we go. So there we have a couple of bullets, and we should probably do another one, and so I'll stick one there, just to create like a little bit of a kind of little still life, albeit a still life of an arms dealer. But that being said, this is kind of what we're going to end up with. And so I'm just going to zoom in a bit and let's have a look and see what we've got. So I'm going to render that. Okay, so that's all well and good. But what we want to do is I kind of want to have like a bit of a different kind of look to this. So on this one, this panel here, and the one in the background, this one at the moment hasn't got material, so let's create one for it, and let's call it wall. And this is probably going to be the same material as it, so I'm going to use that one, and so I'm going to go to wall, and let's give it a color. It doesn't really matter. Let's give it that color. That's a particularly gross color, but it doesn't really matter. And so now when we go to rendered, we should see that our floor is this color and the walls are that sort of sickly green color. So what I want to do now is I want to give the floor some texture. And so I'm going to put an image texture on it. So the way to do that is where it says color, this is the color, which you can see, or unless you're blind. And then this here, this gives you the opportunity to put a texture in, to replace it with something. And you can replace it with a whole bunch of stuff. But what I'm going to do is replace it with an image texture. And I'm going to go, okay, boom. What it does, it's because I'm on wall. So I didn't want to do that. So let me go and remove that. And so what I want to do is click on this one here, which is floor. And I want to go to here and I'll replace it with an image texture. And then what happens is that it turns it pink. I don't know why it turns it pink. It just does. It's a Blender thing. It's got nothing to do with me, but it just does because it hasn't got an image yet. It's saying that there's a texture, but there isn't one. So I need to open one. And before I found one on the internet, and it is in my 3D folder, and it's called wood. And nothing's changed. And the reason why is because this square panel, it doesn't really know where to put it, so you need to tell it. So I'm going to go, and the way it positions it is via a vector, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a generated one. What it will do is it will just work out, it will make a best guess. So now it's done a best guess and it's put down a wooden texture like so, and that's all fair enough. And then I'm going to grab on my wall texture, and I'm going to go color, and I'm going to look for a wall texture, and I'm going to go for image texture, and I am going to again open something, And hopefully in my 3D folder I should have something. I don't. I have something down here which is called bricks. Go on, open it. So I'm going to use that, and again I need to create a vector, and it's going to be generated. So there we go. Now I've got a wooden texture and I've got some bricks, which is all cool in the game. So what I want to do now is I want to give the floor texture a little bit of a bump. So something like the wall texture, which is easy enough, I can, where it says displacement, and the displacement is the way that objects are given a bump map, I am going to put in some noise. What it will do is that when it's just put in a little bit of noise, it's just roughened it up a bit. You can't really notice it but where you will notice it a lot when you move around. And then I am going to, and on my floor, it's very glossy, like super glossy. So I'm going to make that less glossy because it looks kind of weird. Now it's looking a little bit better, and I'll make it about 0.5 or something, I don't know. So this is all great, but what I want to do as well, I want to put a little bit of bump on the floor, but I don't want to use a noise texture because it would look a bit weird. So what I'm going to do is I am going to open up another window, and I'm going to keep my render window here. I'm going to keep a little one there, and I'm going to keep this one here as my, so I can sort of select stuff, so I can move around and I can select things. And on this window, rather than it being the 3D view, I'm going to use something called a node editor. Dun dun dun, scary. It is relatively scary. And the node editor is the way that Blender handles textures. And so if you zoom in a little bit, you can see what's happening. And it's got, this is the material output, which is what the floor is looking like. It's a glossy surface, and this is how rough it is. And then the color is controlled by this image. And it's a generated texture. The vector is going in there, and the color is going in there, and then and it's just like a big chain. And when you're doing really complicated textures, what you end up doing is you end up linking all of these things, and you create these massive big sort of trees. And then you can create like really interesting kind of textures. So you could say, for example, you could make something that's rusty, but then the bits that are not rusty could be reflective, and that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is just, this is the simplest way of doing it. If you end up kind of wanting to do more Blender, then there are more complicated ways of doing it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the image output, and I'm going to drag it and drop it into the displacement. And then you'll see here that it's displaced, and it's given it a slight bump. And you can't really see because I've taken the roughness up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop that down, make it a bit glossier, and then you can really see it. So that's kind of doing a simple displacement map. And now I'm going to try and just, so I'm going to get rid of this panel, which is just right click on the PC, but on the Mac is a little bit more complicated. So join area, and I'm just gonna, you get a big arrow and then it will just join it together. And then on this one I'm going to go join area, and I'm going to join it together. So now I've got this, and what I'm going to do is just going to go into solid frame again, and I am just going to try and add some more lights. So at the moment it's got this light, which is a lamp, and I'm going to show you another way of creating lights. So I am going to go add, and I'm going to create a plane. So here's my plane here, and that gets created where your 3D cursor is. And I'm going to just rotate it a bit, kind of like that. So now what I got, it's got this little object here, which is not really doing a huge amount. And you're kind of thinking, what the hell is that for? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go new. I'm going to create a new surface texture or a new surface material, and I'm going to make this emission. And what that will do, if I go on to rendered, is this can create light. So let's put it up to 5, for instance. Creates more light. Let's make it even brighter, 15. Creates more light. And then you can take this, it's easier to move around in a solid view. So I can take this now and I can start moving it about and use that as a light source. And you can move it around a little bit like a big lamp. And it's kind of handy because you can make loads of these and you can make loads of different colors. And so when I go and look at this, then my lighting is going to be improved because it's almost like I've created like a little panel light, like one of our LED panel lights that we used before. And so now that I've kind of got that, you can really see the sort of bump mapping kind of happening on this tabletop. The reason why it doesn't look that hot in terms of the is because this is quite a large object, and so the texture gets a little bit crushed because the texture is not big enough, and that's why you end up tiling things and making things bigger that way. So I'm just going to pull this along, and there's probably a gap between here and here. I'll just turn the camera around. So there we go. Right, now the thing that I would change in order to make this look better is I would grab these textures here. So this one, which is the copper one, is looking a little bit dark, so I'd lighten it a little bit. Make it a little bit more, make it a bit more interesting. I would take this material. This material again is a little bit, it doesn't really look particularly. There's too much yellow in it, so I would take it down a bit and just make it a little bit more realistic. And so now it's kind of looking a little bit better. So just take a bit of time to make the rendering, and then just take a little bit of time to render out the metallic texture, and then it's kind of looking a little bit better. Right, so once you've done that, then I